Hey, what's up everybody? BDL44 coming at you with another video. So, without watching any highlights of the Clipper game, I understand that Paul George, in his very first game coming back to the Clippers since injuring himself, went off for 30 plus points in a 25-point comeback win. And to be honest with you, I'm speaking about it, first of all, as a fan of the sport, and congratulate him for coming back from his injury and on a good performance. As a Laker fan, you want to throw shots at the Clippers, or as a talking head, you want to get on here and get straight to your spiel. But this morning, before getting into all that, you just want to be a human being. So congratulations to Paul George on coming back from his injury and playing well before all that other stuff starts up. So the next thing is, this kind of speaks to my theory about the Clippers playing rope-a-dope with the Western Conference. They're playing with us because this is a situation where, you see, I know how good of a coach Ty Lue is and how savvy of an executive Jerry West is, and obviously how successful and brilliant of an owner Palmer is. And I'm kind of disappointed in my position as a Laker fan, living in this city, having the history of the Clippers and all of that, because I cannot objectively view them, or at least have chosen not to objectively view them based on my Laker fandom. But since they're in LA and they are doing certain things, I am paying attention to them from afar. And what I'm seeing is strategy. Now, I could be wrong, but my thought is they are a lot more healthy than they are leading on, particularly them two stars. That's what I'm here to say. Paul George coming back scoring, I think it was 34 points. I ain't certain. Like I said, I didn't watch some highlights or nothing. That's the Laker fan talking to you, but like I said, from afar, I'm watching. And he came back in the best condition. And that's why I feel like the Clippers did a good job of just not giving any timetable, not talking too much about the injury. Luckily enough, they don't have to deal with being asked too many questions about it, like unlike the Lakers, who have to deal with it all day, every day. But they've just handled it in such a way to where you didn't really think too much about it. I think most people came to a certain assumption that either Paul George would eventually come back or not, but the point was you had no inclination of which it was, and I really thought of that a certain way. Think about the type of players that they have, the way the team was initially constructed, the type of trades that they made, particularly to pick up Norman Powell, even though he's hurt. Those were pieces that are going to help you win. And then I think about the timeline. Now, I'm not saying these guys are old. They're not old, but they're about 3 minutes away from being old. So this playoffs, this particular one, still actually matters to both of them. I think about when they got injured. Seems like before the All-Star break. How long they've had to condition. When I started hearing about both of them, being able to ramp up their regiments, which is a long time ago, which tells me they've been working on their bodies, both of them. And I just see how this timeline is gearing up. The tea leaves are showing us that Paul George was on his way back, but had possibly been kind of extending his return because he really didn't know what was going on with that, but you heard that he was working out. So you're like, okay, he's coming close, he's closer. You weigh the injury versus the timeline. You're saying, you know what, this is taking longer than usual, but you ain't heard about no setbacks. It's like, because he's been working on his conditioning. And you just know Ty Lue is not coaching for nothing. Those guys are not working out to come back next season. They're working out to come back for the playoffs. And you put all that together, and that's the conclusion I've come to. So, listen, I'm not saying the Clippers are going to win the championship or win the West, but what I am saying is they're about to come out of the first. They're gonna go into the first round and they're going to catch whoever they play in that first round slipping. That's what I think is going to happen. They're going to win their first round matchup. I don't know who they play. It's Utah, Dallas. Hopefully it's not Dallas. They run into them every year and get knocked off by them every year. But whoever the Clippers see in the first round got to deal with them. Now, there are some matchups the Clippers don't want themselves. But I would be very concerned if I were any of them top teams if I had to see that team right now. Because Paul George is now back. They have the best coach, maybe in the Western Conference, that may be in the entire league. And they have their two superstars who are going to be coming back into the fold, of whom the whole system is built around, of whom have fluid games to where it ain't going to be a whole lot of an adjustment for them to come back and work their way into the fold, especially since they have players like Reggie Jackson, Amir Coffey, Terrence Mann, Isaiah Hartenstein, and other guys on that team who are more equipped to carry more of the load than they ever would have been if those guys were healthy throughout the season. Ty Lue, who's made those guys better players throughout that process while those guys been gone. That team is deeper than they've ever been before, because the team that they drug, their way through this season with was supposed to be the role players. They made some trades and got better, as I said. They found some pieces that, out of nowhere, essentially, in some cases. It kept guys from previous years who don't need to learn the system, like Zubats. This is a team that can play a million different ways based on the various different, types of positionless players that they have, including the two superstars that we're talking about. And they play defense. They're a lot better defensive team with those two superstars for obvious reasons. They can withstand injury to Kawhi or Paul George in theory because of that same thing that I just said, the depth. And like I said, Coach Lue, he's going to strategize against you. I think the question I have about the Clippers is their bigs. Isaiah Hartenstein, y'all know I like that player a lot, but I'm not sure I want him to be my starting center in the playoffs just yet. He has to continue to develop, and maybe he's headed there with the type of playing time he's received. He might be headed in that direction. I think he'll eventually get that good. And then Ivica Zubac, of whom I think is a good player. I like him. Obviously, somebody who's our guy, a Laker guy, but he's a bit limited in some ways. And I think it's going to get dangerous for them if they run into an Ayton or a Karl Anthony Towns. That's a tough matchup. But you know what I'm saying? If they have all of their horses, I would love to see them go up against Minnesota, by the way. Patrick Beverley versus the Clippers, that'd be crazy, yo. But anyway, that's what I'm thinking about. It's like that Clipper team is dangerous. Whoever they see in that first round, I think is going to get hit in the mouth hard. I think they're going to scheme against you. I think they're going to get better as the playoffs progress based on the fact that those two superstars are going to get worked back into the lineups in the equation, playing for something. It could get a little tricky working guys back into the equation, but Ty Lue is so savvy and he adjusts so well from moment to moment that whatever's gone wrong, you can best believe he's going to put a stop to it quickly and readjust and throw you a different look. So when you consider how he schemes and how he handles things, you can see where they'll be able to weather the storm. This is extremely interesting to me because I'm not only looking at them, I'm looking at Denver, who has a similar dynamic with Porter and Murray coming back, and then the elevated games of guys like Bones Highland and Morris and Gordon. You know what I mean? Those guys are used to doing more, so now those other guys, those superstars, can work their way back in slowly. And the longer they hang around in the playoffs, the more healthy and the more rhythm those stars get. And we know what kind of killers those two are. So when you're looking at a playoff situation, like I've told you guys, some of the teams coming into the playoffs, their records are not who they are. And because they're different now, you may be looking at a situation where they may be favored to win, even though they're seated behind the team that they're facing, especially in that middle pack of this Western Conference. So, yeah, Denver, Clippers, look out. I got a feeling those teams have a chance to upset somebody in that first round. Especially looking at Golden State. They're vulnerable. They're really vulnerable. Because even though they have depth, the one thing that I was saying about Golden State that really made me intrigued by them is the prospect of having Wiseman come back and throwing him as a 7-footer who can do a lot of different things, including shoot threes. Putting him on the floor in that mix, I thought would be overwhelming for everybody when you consider everything that the Golden State Warriors have. But when you remove that dynamic, or should I say never insert it, suddenly they're not scary in terms of length. They obviously can defend with Draymond, Clay, and those guys. They're, a great defensive team. But for me, when I was considering their championship prospect, I was thinking of a guy like Wiseman either starting for them and providing ridiculous length, or coming off the bench and being somebody who could just continue to pour it on. When Steph, Clay, and all those guys take a breather, they got a lineup out there that you have to try to adjust to, that you can't run different lineups against, for example. And they can do whatever they want against you because of it, but you just, with Wiseman not coming in, now you're talking about Steph working his way back from injury. Obviously a little different than PG and Kawhi, because he is had a more recent injury. So then you look at Clay, and he's going to be ready for the playoffs, I think. But he's still working his way back, etc. I just look at the Golden State Warriors. I say I love Jordan Poole's game. They got a heck of a team, obviously. Wiggins, all that. But my concern is that without Steph Curry and without bringing in Wiseman, or should I say with a limited Steph Curry, because he'll definitely be back. With that being the case, they are one of those teams that I would say if the Clippers run into them this year, Clippers going to have an interesting chance at winning that series. Interesting chance, especially if Kawhi is able to come back. So, it's gonna be a heck of a situation. The Clippers are in the play-in tournament, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's where I last saw them seeded. So that means they would get a chance in one of those top 2 seeds. If they make out of the play-in tournament, which I expect they will. If they're gonna run into somebody like San Antonio or New Orleans, I'm saying the Clippers are gonna win that game. They're gonna stay in there. So it's interesting, man. Getting ready for these playoffs, even though my team isn't involved. Like I said, if I want to circle back to the point, looking at these Clippers, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, they are coming. They're coming, and they have one of the best strategists with them. So, stay on your toes, Western Conference. I would try to avoid that particular team. I really would. I would want to avoid them like the plague, avoid Denver like the plague. Yeah. A young Memphis team. I like Memphis a whole lot. I think they're going to be favored quite a bit. But they're in a very dangerous zone if they catch that Clipper team. I'm not saying Memphis is going home in the first round, but Ja Morant is not healthy, and that is concerning. Even though they're winning all these games without him, they're a wonderful team. But I think at the end of the day, I got to be honest with myself about Memphis and say they're still young. They're still a young team. And while they have guys like Steven Adams, you love the fact that they have a great coach in Jaeger. But honestly, I just think that they are going to run into a tough first-round matchup just by default. And I think everybody's just poo-pooing and shooing them in as a team that's just going to automatically at least get to the second round. And I feel like their first round could feel like a second round if they run into the wrong team. That's all I'm saying. So, that's going to be a test for a young bunch. And so, anyway, just rambling at this point. I thank you guys for rocking with BDF 44. Today's a big day for me personally. It's the 7th year anniversary of my mom's passing. So, I just appreciate everybody's patience and prayers. And yeah, man, that's what we're doing. We want to be human first today. Like, again, congratulations to PG on this big performance coming back. solidarity from a Laker fan who normally doesn't have a whole lot of good to say about y'all, but I'm just watching, and I think big things could be coming from the Clippers. So that's it. That's what I got, man. Peace, everybody.